My grandson locked me outside in the middle of winter. No coat, just ice on my skin and laughter in his voice. For 25 minutes I stood shaking, my teeth chattering so violently I thought they might crack. It's just a resilience test. He smirked through the glass door, his phone recording every humiliating second. 2 weeks later, his scholarship was frozen, and so was I. I'm Dorothy Chen, 72 years old, and I spent 43 years teaching high school English. People said I had a gift for reading between the lines, for seeing what students really meant beneath their words. But somehow, I completely missed the signs with Tyler. Maybe because love makes you blind, or maybe because when you raise a child, from age 7, you see what you want to see. Tyler came to live with me when my daughter Sarah died in that car accident. He was this broken little boy who cried himself to sleep every night.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
I thought if I just loved him enough, gave him everything he needed, he'd heal, and he did seem to heal. He grew tall, made good grades, got into medical school with a partial scholarship I was proud to supplement. That December night changed everything. Tyler came home for winter break, and I'd made his favorite dinner, pot roast with those little potatoes. We were sitting at my kitchen table when the conversation turned to resilience. "You know, Grandma," he said, cutting his meat with unnecessary force. "Your generation doesn't understand real strength. You all had everything handed to you." I blinked, surprised. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Something cold flickered in his eyes. "I mean, you never faced real challenges. Everything was easier back then. Jobs, houses, college, all just given. To you. Tyler, I worked 2 jobs to put your mother through school, then helped raise you while working full-time." "That's not real adversity," he interrupted sharply. "That's just normal life. You want to know what real resilience looks like? It's about pushing through when you're tested beyond your comfort zone." There was a meanness in his tone I'd never heard before. A cruelty from the boy who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms. "I think you need a real test, Grandma. Something to show you what actual toughness looks like." Before I could respond, he walked to the front door. I heard the lock click. He returned with his phone, camera already recording. "What are you doing?" I asked, confusion making my voice small. "Giving you a chance to prove you're not as weak as your generation seems to be." He gestured toward the back door. "Go outside. It's -5 degrees tonight. Let's see how long you can handle it." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "Tyler, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about a resilience test. You're always going on about how tough things were in your day. Prove it. Go stand outside. No coat. Show me that backbone you're always talking about." The words hit me, like a physical blow. "Honey, I could get frostbite, hypothermia. I'm 72. Exactly. If you can handle it, maybe I'll believe those stories about how hard your generation had it." I looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of the child I'd raised. But there was nothing except cold amusement that made my blood freeze before I ever stepped outside. "Tyler, please don't do this," I whispered, but he was already moving toward me, grabbing my arm and guiding me toward the back door. Not roughly, he was too smart for that, but firmly enough that I understood this wasn't a request. The cold hit me like a wall when he pushed me outside. -5 degrees in nothing but my house dress and slippers. The wind cut through, the fabric like knives, and within seconds, my skin began burning with cold. I turned back, but Tyler was there, holding the door shut. Through the glass, I could see him clearly, phone still recording, that horrible smile on his face. "Tyler, please," I called out, my voice already shaking. "This isn't funny. I could die out here." "Come on, Grandma," he called back. "Show me that resilience you're always talking about." The first 5 minutes were agony. The cold was so intense it felt like fire. My teeth chattered so hard I feared I'd bite my tongue. I kept knocking, calling his name, begging him to let me in. But he just stood there, filming, occasionally laughing at my suffering. By 10 minutes, I couldn't feel my fingers or toes. My whole body shook so violently I could barely stand. The house dress might as well have been paper. I tried to huddle against the door for protection, but Tyler moved to get a better camera angle. "You're doing great, Grandma!" he called out. "Just 15 more minutes." I looked at him through that glass door, this young man I'd loved more than my own life, and something inside me broke. Not from the cold, though that was becoming dangerous. Something deeper. The realization that the child I'd raised saw my suffering as entertainment. By 20 minutes, I was no longer knocking. I was leaning against the door to stay upright. My lips had gone numb, and I felt that dangerous drowsiness that I knew was a sign of hypothermia. My vision blurred around the edges. That's when I heard voices from inside. Tyler's friends had arrived. "Dude, what are you doing?" one asked. "Just giving my grandmother a reality check," Tyler replied with that horrible amusement. "She's always going on about how tough her generation is." "Isn't she really old?" 72, Tyler said, as if that was part of the joke. I heard laughter, then. Not just Tyler's, but from his friends too. They were all watching me freeze, and they thought it was funny. Finally, after 25 minutes, the door opened. I practically fell inside, legs barely supporting me. I was shaking so hard. I couldn't speak. All I could do was sink to the floor, trying to get feeling back. "See?" Tyler said to his friends, as if I wasn't there. "Tougher than she looks." They all went into the living room, leaving me on the floor, still shaking, still processing what had happened. The next morning, Tyler acted like nothing happened. He came down whistling, asked me to make pancakes. When I stared at him, he sighed with exaggerated patience. "Come on, Grandma, don't be dramatic. It was just a test. You proved your point about being tough, didn't you?" But I hadn't proved anything. What I'd discovered was that the grandson I'd loved more than life saw me as nothing more than entertainment. What I didn't know then was that Tyler had posted the video online with the caption, "Teaching Grandma about real resilience. LOL." The pneumonia hit 3 days later. I woke up that Wednesday morning with a chest that felt like someone had poured concrete into my lungs. Every breath was a struggle, and my body temperature was swinging between chills that made my teeth chatter and fevers that soaked my nightgown in sweat. When I tried to get out of bed, the room spun violently, and I had to grip the nightstand to keep from falling. Tyler had left the morning after his resilience test, claiming he needed to get back to campus early for some study group. He'd hugged me goodbye at the door, acting like the most loving grandson in the world, as if he hadn't spent 25 minutes torturing me in sub-zero temperatures just 2 nights before. "Take care of yourself, Grandma," he'd said, squeezing my shoulders. "And remember what we talked about. You're tougher than you think." The casual cruelty of it still took my breath away. Now, alone in my house with a fever climbing toward dangerous territory, I understood exactly how tough I really was. I managed to call my doctor's office, though my voice came out as barely a whisper. Dr. Martinez had been treating me for 15 years, and when I described my symptoms, her concern was immediate. "Dorothy, I need you to get to the hospital right now. Don't drive yourself. Call an ambulance." The ambulance ride was a blur of oxygen masks and worried voices. I remember thinking, as they wheeled me through the emergency room doors, that this was probably exactly what Tyler had hoped would happen. Maybe not consciously, but somewhere in that cold heart of his, he'd wanted to see just how far he could push his old, weak grandmother before she broke. Dr. Martinez met me in the ER, her face grim as she reviewed my chest x-rays. "You have pneumonia in both lungs, Dorothy. This is serious. We're going to need to admit you for at least a week, maybe longer." "How did this happen?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She hesitated, clearly trying to find a gentle way to say it. "Prolonged exposure to extreme cold can severely compromise your immune system, especially at your age. Did you spend time outside recently without proper clothing?" I could have told her the truth then. I could have explained about Tyler's test, about being locked outside in -5-degree weather while my grandson filmed my suffering for entertainment. But something stopped me. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was the last stubborn remnant of family loyalty. Or maybe I just wasn't ready to face the full magnitude of what had happened. "I may have been outside longer than I should have been," I said instead. Dr. Martinez nodded, but I could see the questions in her eyes. She was too professional to push, but she knew there was more to the story. The first few days in the hospital were the worst. The fever spiked to 103 degrees. and I drifted in and out of consciousness. When I was awake, I couldn't stop shivering, despite the heated blankets the nurses kept piling on me. My body was trying to recover from trauma that went far deeper than just exposure to cold. I kept expecting Tyler to visit, or at least call. I'd raised him for 11 years, paid for his education, supported his dreams of becoming a doctor. Surely he would want to know how I was doing. Surely he would feel some guilt about what had happened. But my phone stayed silent. On the 4th day, when my fever finally broke and I could think clearly again, I called him myself. The phone rang 6 times before going to voicemail. "Tyler, it's Grandma. I'm in the hospital with pneumonia. I'd really like to hear from you." He didn't call back. I tried again the next day, and this time he answered, but his voice was distracted, impatient. "Oh, hey Grandma, what's up?" "I'm in the hospital, Tyler. I have pneumonia." There was a pause, but not the kind that suggested shock or concern. More like he was trying to figure out why this was his problem. "Oh, that sucks. Are you feeling better? The ER?" Casual indifference in his voice hit me harder than the fever had. "Tyler, I'm seriously ill. I nearly died." "But you didn't, right? I mean, you're talking to me now, so obviously you're fine." I couldn't speak for a moment. Obviously I was fine. As if pneumonia was just a minor inconvenience, like a head cold. "I was hoping you might come visit," I managed to say. "Yeah, I don't. No. I'm really swamped with midterms and everything. You understand, right? Medical school is pretty intense." Medical school. The irony wasn't lost on me that my grandson, who was studying to be a healer, couldn't be bothered to visit his grandmother in the hospital after he'd been directly responsible for putting her there. "Of course," I said, "because what else could I say? I understand. Great, feel better, okay? Love you." He hung up before I could respond. I lay there in that hospital bed, staring at the phone in my hand, and felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger yet. It was something colder, more calculating. For the first time in my life, I was seeing Tyler clearly, without the filter of love and hope that had blinded me for so many years. The next day, I had a visitor I hadn't expected. Maria Santos, the hospital social worker, knocked on my door and asked if she could sit down for a few minutes. "Dr. Martinez asked me to check on you," she said gently. "She's concerned about your home situation." I looked at her warily. "What do you mean?" "Dorothy, in my 20 years doing this job, I've seen a lot of cases of elder abuse. The combination of your injuries from cold exposure and the fact that you seem to have no family support during your hospitalization, it raises some red flags." Elder abuse. The words hit me like a physical blow. "I'm not being abused," I said automatically. Maria nodded patiently. "I understand this is difficult to talk about, but I want you to know that if someone is hurting you, either physically or emotionally, there are resources available to help. My grandson isn't. He wouldn't." I started to say, but the words died in my throat. Because he would, and he had. "Take my card," Maria said, pressing it into my hand. "And know that whatever you decide to tell me will be completely confidential. Sometimes we need to talk to someone outside the family to see the situation clearly." After she left, I stared at that card for a long time. Elder abuse. Was that what this was? I'd been thinking of it as cruelty, as betrayal, as a young man's twisted idea of a joke. But abuse? That word carried weight I wasn't sure I was ready to handle. But as I lay there in that hospital bed, recovering from pneumonia that Tyler had essentially caused, I couldn't escape the truth anymore. My grandson had deliberately put me in danger. He'd filmed my suffering for entertainment. And now, when I was dealing with the consequences of his actions, he couldn't even be bothered to visit or show genuine concern. This wasn't the behavior of someone who loved me. This was the behavior of someone who saw me as less than human. On my last day in the hospital, Dr. Martinez came to check on me one final time. "You're lucky, Dorothy," she said, reviewing my chart. "A woman your age, with pneumonia this severe. It could have been much worse." "I know," I said quietly. "I have to ask," she continued, closing the chart and looking at me directly. Is there anything you want to tell me about how you ended up with this level of cold exposure? Because I've been thinking about it, and the circumstances just don't add up to an accidental situation. I looked into her kind, concerned face and almost told her everything. Almost explained about Tyler's resilience test and the video he'd made of my suffering. Almost admitted that my own grandson had tortured me for fun, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. I made a mistake, I said instead. I went outside without thinking about how cold it was. Dr. Martinez nodded, but I could see she didn't believe me. Well, if you ever want to talk about it, you know where to find me. When the taxi dropped me off at my house that afternoon, I stood on my front porch for a long moment before going inside. This was the same door Tyler had pushed me out of 8 days ago, the same porch where I'd stood freezing while he filmed my humiliation. Inside, everything looked exactly the same. The kitchen table where we'd been eating dinner, the back door that had become my prison, the living room where his friends had laughed at my suffering. But I wasn't the same. Something fundamental had changed in me during those days in the hospital. The grandmother who had walked into this house 8 days ago, the one who still believed in Tyler's essential goodness, who still made excuses for his behavior, she was gone. I walked to my bedroom and opened the drawer where I kept important papers. My will was there, along with Tyler's birth certificate, school records, and dozens of photos from when he was little. I picked up one picture, Tyler at age 8, grinning as he showed me a drawing he'd made of our family. In the picture, we were holding hands. I studied that little boy's face for a long time, looking for some sign of the man he would become. But there was nothing there except innocence and joy. Somewhere along the way, that innocent child had turned into someone capable of cruelty, and I was done pretending otherwise. I put the photo back in the drawer and closed it firmly. Then I walked to my kitchen and made myself a cup of tea, sitting at the same table where this had all started. My phone rang while I was sitting there. Tyler's name appeared on the screen. For the first time in his life, I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail Tyler left was exactly what I expected. Hey, Grandma, just checking in. Hope you're feeling better. Call me back when you get a chance. His voice was casual, almost cheerful, as if I'd been in the hospital with a minor cold instead of life-threatening pneumonia that he'd caused. There was no urgency, no real concern, just the bare minimum of what he thought family obligation required. I deleted the message without calling him back. 2 days later, I was still moving slowly, my chest tight and my energy limited. I'd been home from the hospital for less than 48 hours when my doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see a woman about my age standing on my porch, holding what looked like a casserole dish. I opened the door to find Eleanor Walsh, from 3 houses down. We'd been neighbors for 15 years but had never been particularly close, just the occasional wave across the yard and small talk at the mailbox. "Dorothy," she said, her face creased with concern. "I heard you were in the hospital. I brought you some soup." "That's very kind of you," I said, accepting the dish. "Would you like to come in?" Eleanor hesitated. "Actually, there's something I need to talk to you about." We sat in my living room, the same room where Tyler's friends had gathered to laugh at my suffering just over a week ago. Eleanor seemed nervous, fidgeting with her purse strap. "I wasn't sure if I should say anything," she began slowly, "but I feel like you have a right to know." My stomach clenched. "Know what?" "My granddaughter Emma showed me something on her phone. Yesterday, a video of you." The words hit me like ice water. "What kind of video?" Eleanor pulled out her phone with shaking hands. "I'm so sorry, Dorothy. I don't know how many people have seen this, but..." She turned the screen toward me, and there I was, standing outside my back door in my house dress, shaking violently from the cold, banging on the glass while Tyler's voice could be heard clearly from behind the camera. "Come on, Grandma, show me that resilience you're always talking about." The video was about 2 minutes long, just highlights of my 25-minute ordeal, edited to show the most humiliating moments. Tyler's laughter was audible throughout, along with comments from his friends when they arrived. At the end, there was a close-up of my face when I finally came inside, my lips blue from cold, my eyes wide with shock and pain. The caption read, Teaching Grandma about real resilience. LOL. Old people think they're so tough but can't handle a little cold. Challenge completed. I watched myself on that screen, saw my own suffering reduced to entertainment, and felt something inside me turn to steel. How many people have seen this? I asked, my voice remarkably steady. Emma said it has over 50,000 views, Eleanor said quietly. She showed it to me because she recognized you from the neighborhood. Dorothy, I'm so sorry. What he did to you. It's unconscionable. 50,000 people had watched my grandson torture me. 50,000 strangers had seen me begging to be let inside my own house while Tyler laughed. The comments below the video, which Eleanor showed me despite my protests, were a mixture of cruel laughter and genuine concern. This is hilarious. Granny got owned. Dude, this is elder abuse. Not funny at all. She's acting like such a drama queen. It's just cold. Someone should call the police. This is sick. Tyler's a legend for this. I handed the phone back to Eleanor, my hands surprisingly steady. Thank you for showing me. Are you going to report this? What he did to you is abuse, Dorothy, and posting it online. She shook her head in disgust. I need some time to think, I said. After Eleanor left, I sat in my kitchen and stared at my phone. Tyler's number was right there in my contacts. I could call him, demand he take the video down, threaten to cut off his financial support if he didn't. But I realized something had fundamentally changed in me during those days in the hospital. I didn't want to negotiate with him anymore. I didn't want to give him chances to explain or apologize. I wanted him to face real consequences for what he'd done. I opened my laptop and began researching. Tyler was in his second year of medical school at State University, where I'd been, supplementing his partial scholarship with $2,000 per month. But more importantly, I discovered that the medical school had a strict code of conduct that included clauses about behavior that reflected poorly on the medical profession. I spent the rest of the day reading through the student handbook, the ethics guidelines, and the disciplinary procedures. Then I started making phone calls. The first call was to Dr. Patricia Williams, the Dean of Student Affairs at Tyler's medical school. We'd met briefly during Tyler's orientation, and she'd seemed genuinely interested in his success. Mrs. Chen, she said when I identified myself. How nice to hear from you. How is Tyler doing? That's actually what I'm calling about, I said. I have some concerns about Tyler's behavior that I think the school should be aware of. There was a pause. What kind of concerns? The kind that might indicate he's not suitable for a career in medicine. Another pause, longer this time. Mrs. Chen, would you be able to come in for a meeting? This sounds like something we should discuss in person. I'll be there tomorrow afternoon. My second call was to Maria Santos, the social worker, from the hospital. Dorothy, she said warmly. How are you feeling? Better, but I've been thinking about our conversation, and I'd like to take you up on your offer to talk. Of course. When would be convenient for you? As soon as possible. That evening, I sat at my computer and did something I'd never done before in my 72 years. I created accounts on social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Not to post the video myself, but to document its existence, to screenshot the comments, to create a permanent record of what Tyler had done. As I scrolled through the responses to his video, I found something interesting. Several comments mentioned Tyler by name, and a few people had tagged the medical school's official account. Word was already spreading about exactly who this future doctor was and what he was capable of. One comment in particular caught my attention. This is Tyler Chen from State Medical School. Someone should let them know what kind of people they're training to be doctors. The internet had already started to hold Tyler accountable in ways I never could have managed on my own. But I wasn't content to let strangers handle this for me. Tyler had made this personal when he decided to torture me for entertainment. Now I was going to make it personal right back. I picked up my phone and called him. This time, he answered on the first ring. Grandma, I was just thinking about you. How are you feeling? I'm feeling like someone who's been betrayed by the person she loved most in the world. A long silence. What do you mean? I saw the video, Tyler. Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had lost all its artificial warmth. Grandma, That was just a joke. I didn't mean anything by it. A joke? Tyler, I nearly died from pneumonia because of what you did to me, and you filmed it. You put it online for strangers to laugh at. Look, I'm sorry if you got sick, but that's not really my fault. You chose to go outside. The casual cruelty in his voice, the complete refusal to take responsibility, crystallized something in me. You're right, Tyler. It's not your fault. Because after tomorrow, you won't be my problem anymore. What's that supposed to mean? You'll find out. I hung up and immediately blocked his number. Then I opened my laptop and began typing a detailed letter to the medical school's ethics committee, complete with links to the video and screenshots of the comments. I attached medical records from my hospital stay, Dr. Martinez's report on my cold exposure injuries, and a timeline of events leading up to my illness. As I sealed the envelope that would change Tyler's life forever, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I felt powerful. The meeting with Dean Williams took place in her office overlooking the medical school campus. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes that turned hard as granite when I showed her Tyler's video. "Mrs. Chen," she said after watching it twice, "I want you to know that this behavior is completely antithetical to everything we try to instill in our medical students." "I'm glad to hear that," I said, because I was beginning to wonder if cruelty was part of the curriculum. She didn't smile at my dark humor. Instead, she leaned forward, her expression grave. "Can you tell me about the medical consequences of this incident?" I pulled out the medical records I'd brought. I was hospitalized for 8 days with severe pneumonia in both lungs. My doctor said the prolonged cold exposure compromised my immune system to a dangerous degree. Dean Williams reviewed the documents carefully, and Tyler knew about your hospitalization. I called him while I was in the hospital. He said he was too busy with midterms to visit. Something flickered across her face. Disappointment, maybe, or disgust. "Mrs. Chen, I need to ask you directly. Do you want to file a formal complaint against Tyler?" I'd been dreading this question because I knew once I said yes, there would be no going back. But as I sat there in that office, surrounded by diplomas and awards celebrating medical excellence and compassion, the answer was clear. Yes. I want him held accountable for what he did. I understand this must be incredibly difficult for you, given your relationship with Tyler. It is, I admitted. But Dr. Williams, if Tyler can do this to someone who loves him, what will he do to patients he doesn't even know? The question hung in the air between us like a challenge. Dean Williams nodded slowly. You're absolutely right. I'll be initiating a formal investigation immediately. Tyler will be suspended from classes pending the outcome. Suspended. The word hit me with unexpected force. Part of me felt vindicated, but another part, the grandmother who'd raised him, who'd paid for his education, felt a stab of something that might have been grief. There's something else, Dean Williams continued. The video has been circulating on social media with tags to our school's accounts. We're already receiving calls from prospective students' families asking about our vetting process. I hadn't expected that. I'm sorry the school is being affected. Don't apologize. If anything, this is helping us identify a serious problem. Before Tyler progressed further in the program, she paused. Can I ask what made you decide to come forward? I thought about that question for a long moment. For 43 years, I taught high school students. I've seen what happens when young people with cruel tendencies aren't held accountable. They don't grow out of it. They just get better at hiding it. Dean Williams made some notes in Tyler's file. The investigation will take approximately 2 weeks. During that time, Tyler will not be allowed on campus or to attend classes. If the committee finds him in violation of our conduct code, he could face expulsion. Expulsion. Another word that hit harder than I'd expected. What happens to his scholarship if he's expelled? It would be terminated immediately, along with his enrollment. I nodded, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd set in motion. Tyler's entire future, the career he'd dreamed of since childhood, could be over in 2 weeks. When I left the medical school that afternoon, I felt lighter than I had in months. For the first time since that terrible night, I felt like I had some control over the situation. But Tyler wasn't going to accept this quietly. The first sign came that evening when my landline rang. I'd forgotten to block that number. What did you do? Tyler's voice was sharp, angry. All pretense of the loving grandson finally dropped. I told the truth, I said calmly. They suspended me. Do you understand what you've done? You've destroyed my entire future over a stupid joke. Tyler, you filmed yourself torturing a 72-year-old woman and posted it online for entertainment. The only person who destroyed your future is you. I didn't torture you. Stop being so dramatic. I was hospitalized for 8 days with pneumonia. That's not my fault. You're the one who went outside. The complete refusal to accept responsibility was stunning, even though I'd expected it. Tyler, you locked me out of my own house in sub-zero weather and refused to let me back in for 25 minutes. You filmed my suffering and posted it online. These are facts, not opinions. Nobody made you stay out there. You could have broken a window or called someone. I almost laughed at the absurdity. You think I should have broken into my own house to escape from you? I think you should have used some common sense instead of just standing there like a victim. Like a victim. As if being victimized by someone you love is a choice, a character flaw. I'm done with this conversation, I said. No, you're not. You're going to call the school and tell them you made a mistake. You're going to explain that you misunderstood what happened. The entitlement in his voice was breathtaking. Even now, with his future hanging in the balance, he believed he could simply order me to fix the consequences of his actions. I'm not doing any such thing. Yes, you are. Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. I'll tell them how you manipulated the situation, how you're trying to destroy my life because I hurt your feelings. Go ahead, I said. Tell them whatever you want. The video speaks for itself. Grandma, please. His voice suddenly shifted, becoming the wheedling tone he'd used as a child when he wanted something. I'm sorry, okay? I'm really sorry. I know I made a mistake, but you can't let them destroy my whole life over it. I'm not letting them do anything, Tyler. I'm simply refusing to lie for you anymore. But I'm your grandson. Doesn't that mean anything to you? For a moment, just a moment, I wavered. This was the child I'd raised, the little boy who used to fall asleep in my lap while I read him stories. The young man I'd sacrificed so much for, whose dreams I'd invested in both financially and emotionally. But then I remembered the look in his eyes as he'd filmed me begging to come inside, the laughter of his friends, the casual cruelty in his voice when he'd dismissed my hospitalization. Being my grandson means you should have treated me with love and respect, I said. Since you chose not to do that, you'll have to live with the consequences. I hate you, he said, his voice cold and vicious. I hate you, and I wish you had died in that hospital. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I cried, not from fear or pain or shock, but from grief. I was mourning the death of a relationship, the loss of a dream. The Tyler I'd loved, the sweet, vulnerable child who'd needed me, had never really existed. Or if he had, he was gone now, replaced by someone capable of wishing death on the woman who'd raised him. But even through my tears, I felt no regret about what I'd done. If anything, Tyler's reaction only confirmed that I'd made the right choice. The investigation would proceed. Tyler would face the consequences of his actions, and I would finally be free. The call came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 12 days after my meeting with Dean Williams. Mrs. Chen, this is Dr. Patricia Williams. I wanted to personally inform you of the committee's decision regarding Tyler. I gripped the phone tighter. What did they decide? Tyler has been expelled from the medical program, effective immediately. His scholarship has been terminated, and he's been banned from reapplying to any medical school within the state university system. Expelled. The word hung in the air like a final judgment. I'd expected it, even hoped for it, but hearing it felt momentous. The committee found his actions completely incompatible with the ethical standards required of medical professionals. Dean Williams continued. The fact that he showed no genuine remorse during his hearing only reinforced their decision. No remorse? I asked, though I wasn't surprised. He maintained that you were overreacting, and that posting the video was just sharing a funny moment with friends. He showed no understanding of why his behavior was problematic. Of course he didn't. Tyler had never accepted responsibility for anything in his life. Why would he start now? Thank you for letting me know, I said, Mrs. Chen, I want you to know that you did the right thing. A person with Tyler's demonstrated cruelty and lack of empathy has no business in medicine. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, processing what this meant. Tyler's dream of becoming a doctor was over. The career he'd planned. Since childhood, the future I'd helped finance and support was gone. I waited for the guilt to hit, but it never came. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The second call came an hour later from an unknown number. You destroyed my life. Tyler's voice was raw with rage. Are you happy now? Are you satisfied? I didn't destroy anything. Tyler, you did that yourself. I can't get into any medical school in the state. Do you understand what you've done? I understand that there are consequences for torturing elderly family members and posting it online for entertainment. It wasn't torture. Stop saying that. Even now, facing the complete collapse of his future, Tyler couldn't admit what he'd done was wrong. Where are you going to go now? I asked, genuinely curious. I don't know. Maybe out of state, if any school will take me after this. Do you have any idea how much that will cost? There it was. Even in his fury and desperation, Tyler assumed I would still be his financial safety net. I suppose you'll have to get a job like most people do. A job? What kind of job can I get with 2 years of medical school and no degree? The same kind of jobs other people without degrees get. Restaurant work, retail, manual labor. The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler had never worked a real job in his life. I'd made sure of that, thinking I was helping him focus on his studies. Now, I realized I'd done him no favors. You can't be serious, he said finally. I'm completely serious. You're 21 years old, Tyler. It's time you learn to support yourself. But I'm your grandson. You're supposed to help family. Family helps each other, Tyler. What you did to me wasn't family behavior. It was the behavior of someone who sees me as less than human. Fine, he screamed. Fine. But don't expect me to ever speak to you again. You're dead to me. I'm already dead to you, I said quietly. You proved that when you filmed me begging to come inside my own house. The line went dead. Over the following weeks, I heard fragments of Tyler's story through the neighborhood gossip network. He'd moved back in with his father's sister, my late son-in-law's family who'd never particularly liked him. He was working at a fast food restaurant, something that apparently mortified him. The video had been taken down from social media, but screenshots lived forever, and his name was now associated with elder abuse in ways that would follow him for years. I also heard that he'd tried to apply to medical schools in other states, but the expulsion from State University was part of his permanent academic record. No reputable medical program would touch him. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered if I'd been too harsh. Tyler was still young. People could change, couldn't they? Maybe I should have given him another chance, tried to work with him instead of destroying his future. But then I would remember the sound of his laughter as I stood freezing outside my own door. I would remember the casual cruelty in his voice when he dismissed my hospitalization. And I would remember what he'd said on that final phone call. I wish you had died in that hospital. No, I had done the right thing. 3 months after Tyler's expulsion, I ran into him at the grocery store. He was wearing a fast food uniform, his face gaunt and angry. When he saw me, his expression twisted with hatred. Happy now? He hissed as he passed me in the cereal aisle. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, not guilt, but a kind of sad finality. I'm at peace, I told him. He stared at me for a moment, as if trying to understand what that meant. Then he turned and walked away. I finished my shopping and drove home to my quiet house, where no one would lock me outside in the cold, where no one would film my suffering for entertainment, where no one would wish death upon me for setting boundaries. For the first time in years, I was truly free. 1 year later, I was living a life I never could have imagined. It started small. Eleanor Walsh, my neighbor who'd shown me Tyler's video, began stopping by for coffee. Then Maria Santos, the hospital social worker, invited me to join a support group for seniors who'd experienced family abuse. I'd resisted at first. I didn't want to think of myself as an abuse victim, but the group became a lifeline. Sitting, In that circle every Thursday evening, listening to other women share their stories, I realized how common my experience was. Grown children who saw elderly parents as ATMs, grandchildren who felt entitled to inheritance while showing no respect for the people who'd earned it, family members who used guilt and manipulation as weapons. But I also heard stories of liberation, women who'd found the courage to set boundaries, to demand respect, to build new lives free from toxic family dynamics. Women who'd discovered that blood relations didn't automatically deserve unlimited forgiveness. "The hardest part," said Margaret, a 75-year-old whose son had been stealing from her for years, "was accepting that the person I'd raised wasn't who I thought he was. But once I stopped making excuses for him, I could finally start living for myself." That resonated deeply. For decades, I'd been living for Tyler, financing his dreams, making sacrifices for his future, accepting poor treatment because I believed family obligations superseded personal dignity. Now, for the first time since Sarah died, I was living for myself. I started taking art classes at the community center, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for when I was working full-time and raising Tyler. My watercolor landscapes weren't masterpieces, but they were mine, created for no one's approval but my own. I joined a book club at the library. We met twice a month to discuss novels I chose because they interested me, not because they were on some curriculum. The other members, mostly women my age, became genuine friends. People who valued my opinions, who laughed at my jokes, who saw me as more than just a caregiver or financial provider. I even started dating. Harold Fitzgerald, a retired mathematics professor whose wife had died 3 years earlier, began chatting with me at the book club meetings. He was kind, funny, and treated me with a respect I'd forgotten was possible. When he asked me to dinner, I said yes, without hesitation. "You seem different than when we first met," Harold said one evening as we walked through the park near my house. "More present, somehow. I think I'm finally living my own life instead of someone else's," I told him. He nodded, understanding, immediately. His own adult children lived across the country and rarely called. It's liberating, isn't it, when you stop waiting for other people to value you and start valuing yourself? Spring turned to summer, and I barely thought about Tyler anymore. Occasionally, Eleanor would mention seeing him around town, still working food service jobs, still looking angry at the world. Once, she told me he'd tried to enroll in community college but had dropped out after one semester. Apparently, he couldn't handle having to work while going to school, she said. Never learned how to manage both. I felt a flicker of something that might have been pity, but it passed quickly. Tyler was 22 now, old enough to figure out his own life. His struggles weren't my responsibility anymore. The real test came in December, almost exactly 1 year after Tyler's resilience test. I was decorating my Christmas tree, something I'd done alone for years, but this time by choice rather than abandonment, when my doorbell rang. Tyler stood on my porch, thinner than I remembered, his face hollow. He looked older than his 22 years, aged by consequences he'd never learned to handle. "Hi, Grandma," he said quietly. I didn't invite him in. "Tyler, I wanted to talk to you, to apologize." I studied his face, looking for signs of genuine remorse. What I saw instead was desperation. This wasn't about making amends. It was about getting something he needed. "I'm listening," I said. "I know what I did was wrong. I was young and stupid, and I hurt you. I'm sorry." The words were right, but they felt rehearsed, empty. "What do you want, Tyler?" His carefully composed expression cracked slightly. "I want to go back to school, medical school, but I need help repairing my reputation, and I need financial support." There it was. After everything, the cruelty, the hospitalization, the year of silence, he still thought I was his personal bank account. "And you think I should help you because we're family," he said, as if that solved everything. "Because you raised me, and that has to count for something." I looked at this young man I'd once loved more than my own life, and felt nothing but a mild sadness for who he might have been. Family goes both ways, Tyler. It means treating each other with love and respect. It means showing up when someone is in the hospital. It means not filming your grandmother's suffering for entertainment. I said I was sorry. No. You said you wanted something and thought an apology might get it for you. Those are very different things. Tyler's mask dropped completely then, revealing the entitled, angry person he'd always been underneath. Fine. Be that way. But don't come crying to me when you're dying alone in some nursing home with no one who cares about you. I almost smiled at the irony. Tyler, I'm not alone. I have friends, people who actually care about me. Real relationships built on mutual respect, not financial dependence. Those people aren't family. You're right, I said. They're better than family. They chose to love me, and I chose to love them back. No one's obligated to tolerate abuse just because we share DNA. Tyler stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. The concept of earned love, of relationships based on respect rather than obligation, was completely alien to him. You'll regret this, he said finally. I've never regretted anything, less in my life. I closed the door and went back to decorating my tree. Through the window, I watched Tyler sit in his car for a long time before finally driving away. That night, Harold called to confirm our plans for Christmas dinner. My book. Club friends had invited me to their holiday party. Maria from the support group had asked me to co-facilitate a new group for women rebuilding their lives after family estrangement. My calendar was full of people who valued me, activities that brought me joy, commitments I'd made because I wanted to, not because I felt obligated. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I realized something profound. Tyler had been wrong about me dying alone. The person who was truly alone was him. He'd burned every bridge, alienated everyone who'd ever loved him, and now faced a future with no one willing to tolerate his cruelty. His winter, the one he'd started when he locked me outside in the cold, was just beginning. Mine was finally over.